this is Christine from Thrive CRNA. And so I'm here to say hello, and I'm excited to be here. I see someone here. Oh, so today I just wanted to discuss a little bit. Hey, how are you, Manster Man? So I'm Christine, and I'm just going to do a really short introduction if you don't know who I am. I am currently a CRNA, and I've been in the industry for about a decade. And I would say that I love being a CRNA out of any career I've been involved in. I was first a registered nurse, and I worked in the ICU for hmm, maybe about 5 years or so before I went into CRNA school. But my journey was a little bit different. My journey, I was in the ICU working, and then I was going to nurse practitioner school. And then I changed my mind and decided that I wanted to go into CRNA. So I switched schools. And then I went through my program, graduated, and I've been practicing. I have a couple of bullet points I wanted to discuss. Okay. So my background as a CRNA, so it's a little bit different than many CRNAs. There's a little bit of differences within us all. But when I graduated my nurse anesthesia program, I was a master's prepared CRNA. Okay. And so that's a little bit different. Hey, No Man Can. Doing great. just doing a little discussion. So, a little bit different. Now, there are new updates with 2025 with becoming a CRNA. So, I was a master's prepared CRNA, which is about a 2 to 2.5 year program. Now, for 2025, it is currently a 3 to 3.5 year, depending on the school, because now the programs to become a CRNA is doctoral. Okay, you'll be a doctorate in nurse anesthesia practice. Okay, so I'm currently not a doctor. I am a nurse anesthetist, and there's different levels of schooling. Before 2025, master's prepared nurse anesthetist. And now for 2025 onwards, you have to get a doctorate. So it's a little bit of a longer schooling. So they do say a doctor of nurse anesthesia, or they may say nurse anesthesiologist, but you are still an advanced practice nurse. Okay. So it's not 4 years like a regular doctor. Someone asked that question. It's not 4 years, it's about 3 years of schooling, approximately, plus or minus a year. I mean, not a year, sorry, plus or minus like a couple of months. So I'll give you an example. There are some schools that it's about 3 years. For example, MUSC, for example, in South Carolina, it's approximately a 3 year program. Okay. Okay. I see I'm a patient and I have one leg. It's okay. Um, and he says 4 years to become a doctor. So medical doctor is different from CRNA. Okay. So when you are a CRNA, a nurse, you're an advanced practice nurse, versus being a medical doctor, that's totally different schooling. Um, yeah. So I'll go ahead if anyone has any other questions. All right. So when you're thinking about why become a CRNA, like I'm here talking to you about being a CRNA, I would say if you're really interested in surgery in the operating room, you may be interested in a lot of autonomy and a lot of variety. That's one of the nice things I like about anesthesia. And in general, what I love about nursing. The most beautiful thing about nursing, there's so many things you can do within nursing. You can work in informatics, which is working on the electronic health record. You can work in the hospital. You can be a professor. You can be a teacher. You can work in pediatrics with children. There's so many options what you can do in nursing. So even if you decide that you don't want to go to school for anesthesia, for example, but you're interested in nursing, it's a great career, and also a lot of financial stability, a ton of jobs, and a lot of hospital nowadays are opening up. Actually, like long time ago, there used to be a lot of hospitals that had their own nursing programs, but it's actually coming back with a lot of hospitals opening nursing programs. Some of the programs are about 2 years, so that would be an associate prepared nurse, but you can also go ahead and get your bachelor's after. Some actual hospitals will pay for you to go back to school to get your bachelor's. So let's see here. I have been a so I Manster Man, he says, I've been a CNA for about 2 years and I do apologize. I don't know if this is the field for me anymore, but I'm interested to learn about it. Thank you. Yes. So a CNA, you probably work, in a facility where you're assisting the nurses and you're desiring to maybe go back. And I know you may not know for sure, do I really want to be a nurse? It's a big commitment. But there are many different types of nurses. There's an LPN, okay? Then that's more shorter schooling. Then there's a registered nurse, and there's different levels. You can be a registered nurse with an associate's degree, which is about a two and a half year, depending on the program, or you can be a bachelor's prepared nurse, which is about 4 years. Now, when you think about becoming a CRNA, what does this mean to me, right? Um, if you want to go into nursing, depending on whatever degree you may have, okay? So saying maybe you have another degree, for example, maybe you're a music degree, or maybe you have another degree in something different, or maybe you don't have a degree. A lot of times you can take prerequisite courses to get accepted into a nursing program, even a 2-year program. They'll tell you, okay, you need to take statistics, or you might need to take biology, or maybe you have to take anatomy, physiology. Depends on the program. Depends on the program. It varies from program to program. Some have more requirements, some has less requirements. And so, but a lot of community schools, which are like 2-year schools, um, it's like a community school, and it's literally like 2 years approximately. So actually, at my hospital, there are many nurses who have 2-year degrees, associate's degrees, and they're registered nurses, and a lot of job availability within just being a registered nurse. It's such a huge shortage in nurses. The average nurse, when I remember learning about the average nurse, was in their 40s. Now it's like in their 50s. And also professors are much older as well, because a lot of people are going into nursing and working as a nurse and not really going into the education area, like to educate. So there's a lot of job opportunities. And because of that shortage, you can work literally anywhere. Um, they even have situations where you can be a nurse and you can travel, and they will pay for you to travel as a nurse. That's how a need of nursing. Now, any for example, you're saying, if one of the persons said about their 2 years of being a CNA, that's actually great, because you've worked with nurses, you have experiences with nurses, you get to see the differences. You get to see doctors in action, you get to see nurses, you get to see all different specialties within the medical field, and that is great to have that under your belt. So if you were to apply to a nursing program, just basic nursing program, not even basic, it's amazing, a nursing program, you have a great background. So that is amazing. Okay. Now, if you were to get a 2-year program, so associate's program, which is 2 years, okay, and sometimes the programs are part-time or full-time, many options. You can work, for example, in nursing. Some hospital will accept you to go into the ICU with a 2-year degree and get your ICU experience, right? Because you need ICU experience, which means intensive care unit or critical care experience in the hospital to even go into CRNA school. So, give an example. You have a 2-year degree, you get experience, and then you go into the ICU. Okay. Now, some hospitals or facilities will pay for you to go back to school for your bachelor's. So, you don't have to pay out of pocket. A lot of times, the hospital will give you money to go back to school. They'll pay for your tuition and you go to school. That's a great option. So, now, first, you have a 2-year degree, you have a job, you're working as a nurse, getting experience, and you're getting the facility to pay for you to go get your bachelor's degree. Why do I say bachelor's degree? You're required to have a bachelor's degree to even apply to a CRNA program. So if you have an associate's degree, you have to go back to get your bachelor's degree. Okay. So what does that mean? So if you get your 2-year degree, it can take another year. It could take a year and a half for you to get your bachelor's degree after your 2-year degree. But you'll be working, getting your experience, and so building your resume. And I think that's great. It's a win-win situation. But if you have the option, and you can go to a 4-year degree school. So a lot of, saying for example, you're maybe in high school and you're thinking about going to college and you're deciding, what should I do? You have options. You could do 2-year school or 4-year school. And I would say go for the 4-year school. But if you're already in life, this is your second or third career, there are other options as well. So saying you have, maybe give an example, a bachelor's degree in psychology, and now you decide that you want to go back to school to become a CRNA. Just giving you an example. I would say there is something called an accelerated nursing, bachelor's of nursing programs out there now, because nowadays a lot of people are going into nursing as a second, third career. So that's an option. So you have a degree, you take prerequisite courses like we spoke about before. Maybe you take statistics, a couple of them. I actually looked up a little bit, chemistry. It can be anatomy, physiology. I kind of looked up some stuff just to make sure because things have changed. Then you get accepted into this accelerated program. An accelerated program could be about 12 months to 18 months to get your bachelor's in nursing, even though you're outside, your degree was in something different. So that's another option. That's how much of a shortage there is and how much jobs there are out there. So also look into that. That's another option. So you may say to yourself, this CRNA, like, is this really something I'm really into? What's the future in CRNA for me? What does a job look like? So the outlook with CRNA, so giving you an example, there have been some studies have shown there'll be a 38% increase in job growth by the time 2032, which is, maybe 7 years from now. But you may think, that's like, what does that mean? That's pretty significant. Even when I'm working currently, there are so many jobs. There's so much shortages. I mean, the growth of surgeries and population and people who need, just even healthcare services is constantly growing. And so looking at that perspective, there's so much growth. So with this job, think about maybe there's a lot of people going into nursing, but there's even a smaller percentage of people going into nurse anesthesia. Is you have nurse practitioners, which is amazing job opportunity. You have midwives. So nurse practitioners, you can work in family medicine. You can work in primary care, like in an office. You can work in pediatrics. You can work in the hospital facilities. You can work in surgery as well, assisting the surgeon, for example. You can work in a bunch of different specialties, right? Then you have pediatric nurse practitioners who focus just on peds. Then you have midwives, and that's another advanced practice career, and they deliver babies, you know. And then you have nurse anesthesia, and there's a lot more, and it's family, which these nurse practitioners work with the whole lifespan, geriatrics, the elderly population. So within advanced practice nursing, it's not just CRNA. There are other areas you can work into. So nursing, that's the one beautiful thing about nursing. There's so many options. Today you may say you want to be a CRNA, tomorrow you may want to be a midwife, right? So that's the beautiful thing of when you are in school for nursing, for example, if you haven't gone to school yet, they will have you go through all the different areas to see for yourself what your options are. Now, even for nursing, for example, this person saying they are a CNA, right? And they're doing for a couple of years. Depending on the facility, some hospitals will even pay you or pay for your tuition to go to school. That's how much of a shortage there is. They have scholarships out there to do nursing. Even in the military, they even have options for you to. They'll pay for you to go back to school. So there's so many options. So don't think that there's no options. There is. Now for me, when I went into nursing, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a pure example of me to make you know that I'm just like you. When I graduated high school, I lived in poverty, in the sense not in poverty, but like I did not my mom and my dad could not pay for me to go to college. They could not pay for me to go to college, but they wanted me to go to college. And so I seeked out a higher education opportunity scholarship funded by the government. And I was able to get that scholarship because I had a low income. So that was an opportunity for me to go to school. And so what that means is a form called a FAFSA. I think it's the same form. And you fill that out. And if you have a low, like you meet like poverty level, like income, you have opportunities for certain, for certain scholarships. Now, things might have changed. That's been probably over 20 years, right? But that was an opportunity for me to go to school because my parents couldn't. And then I had to take out loans. I had to. But I knew that going into the medical field or nursing, I know when I graduate, I'll be able to pay it off. Maybe over a couple of years, maybe my whole lifespan. But I know it's a job that I will be able to pay it off. Versus some careers you go into, you may not have that opportunity to pay it off, right? Some schoolings, it's different. But in the medical field, yes, I feel if you do it right with a budget, you can pay it off. Someone just asked, "Hello, Christopher." Yay! I love that everyone's showing up because I really want to share as much as possible. I'm wanting to go to CRNA school. My grades aren't that good, though. I have a 3.3. I am 30 years old. Is this feasible? Honestly, yes. Now, let me go through. I did a little research to update myself. This is a lot of changes, okay? So, and I do have some examples. I spoke to some students who are currently in the CRNA program that's close to where I work. But let me answer your question first. So, let me go through that specific question. I actually looked that up because that was one of the things for me too. When I went into school, I didn't have the GPA, to be honest. You may think, really? I did not have the GPA. So now the application, depending on the school nowadays, it varies now. Now, when you're thinking about a CRNA program, don't limit yourself to one program. Look at many different programs, okay? So you look at the programs, you look at the application, and a lot of times they may say you may need a GPA of a 3.0 to 3.5. Give an example. So nowadays, a 3.0 to 3.5 is totally fine. You can get into a standard. Now, Sue, you have a 2.36. We'll get into that one too. I'll help you with that question too. So now when you say, okay, your general GPA is a 3.3, what does that mean? That doesn't mean a lot. It's what's in the sciences. So maybe your anatomy, physiology, maybe your microbiology, your chemistry, your biology, your physics. Try to look at your GPA, and you have all these different classes. But the biggest thing is your sciences. Because when you go to a school, you may have a 3.8 GPA, but you can have elective courses, Hebrew, for example, or cultural anthropology. These are all the classes I took when I was in college. And those are your 4.0 GPA classes. But then saying, for example, I did chemistry and I got a 2.0 GPA. Even if my GPA is a 3.8, it's probably in the science is a 2.0. So that hopefully that answers that kind of question. You 3.3, you should apply. Okay. But it's not only that alone. And you're 30 years old. A lot of people who have gone into CRNA school are second or third career. When I went to CRNA school, I had classmates who were in their 40s. I had classmates when I was in nursing who were in their 30s to 40s. It's totally normal. I even have people who I work with, they're maybe 45, 50, which is a beautiful age. They literally just became a nurse. So age is just a number. Now, when you're thinking about your grades of 3.3, what about your ICU experience? Are you currently in the ICU? Right? Are you getting that ICU experience? And also, another thing to think about, do you have your CCRN, which is a critical care certification? Do you have your your PALS, which is pediatric life support, as well as adult life support courses done? You know, what kind of acuity of your hospital, right? What kind of things are you doing on your unit, maybe research wise? These are some of the things got to start thinking in your mind about when you're thinking about CRNA school. Now, Sue, I see you said that you have a 2.36 GPA. Now, listen, if, for example, some of the courses you took that you in school and your GPA is lower, honestly, I would recommend you retaking some of the courses. You may say, oh, why should I do that? Oh, do I really have to? I would say yes. I'll give you an example for me. So when I graduated my nursing program, yes, I had a really high GPA, but my first 2 years of college, I didn't do very well. I had a low GPA. Maybe I wasn't focused. Maybe it was related to me. I was a crew rowing team, and I was doing my rowing as my sport. And then I was also behind in schoolwork because it was a very demanding sport, and I had to be in the lake by 6 in the morning at the boathouse. I had to run maybe 2 or 3 miles, and I wasn't a very good runner. And I barely slept. I remember sleeping in class. Being honest, being truly honest. And I did I did not do well. I literally did not do well my first year of college. So my GPA was probably, I don't even remember. I remember I even got a D. Ugh. But you know what? That was the experience. That's the growth. But I retook classes. So when I graduated, my GPA wasn't the highest. And I remember I didn't initially want to be a CRNA. I wanted to be a nurse practitioner. So I went to nurse practitioner school. And when I was in nurse practitioner school, I was a totally different person, right? I was more mature. I knew what I wanted. I was determined. I wasn't going to say no to going back to school and getting an advanced practice degree. And I'll answer your questions, Christopher, in just a moment. So when I took the courses to for nurse practitioner school, right, I had to retake a lot of courses. My GPA was much higher because of that. So I think in combination with my GPA from when I was doing my bachelor's, and they also the CRNA program I went to looked at my courses I took for nurse practitioner school, and I think that helped me. I think that helped me a lot. So if I had to give you a recommendation, I would say retake a couple of courses. How do you do that the cheapest way? I would go to a community school. I literally would. I would go to a school that's nearby, sign up maybe one course or two courses, depending on how you can do it, and retake courses. They have night courses. They have courses like they'll do grouping of three, like on the weekends. There's so many options nowadays to retake classes at community schools. So I would recommend it. If this is something you want to do, you do it. Okay. Now, Christopher, I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place. So it says I was in the ER for 4 years and I started CVICU 6 months ago. Congrats. Getting the CCRN in a few months. Was thinking if I should go further to SCSC and CMC, or maybe I should try overcompensating my GPA. Okay, so what do you mean by CSC and CMC? Oh my God, I'm sorry. Please explain what that means. But you had 4 years of ER experience. This is very good. You have a wide spread of trauma, probably experience, more certifications. Honestly, I would just focus on CCRN, ICU. I don't think you need to get all the other certifications. If you want to, and that's going to help you, maybe you get more money at your hospital, sure. But for CRNA, you don't need all those other certifications. But CCRN is a must needed certification. Some schools don't require it, but even though they don't require it, they pretty much expect it. So CCRN, you have CVIC for 6 months. That's great. Your GPA looks good. Another thing to think about, some schools, they may require you to take your GRE. So I took the GRE and I did horrible. To be honest, I did terrible. But I'm gonna be honest, I did horrible. I want to be real with you, right? I want to be totally transparent. I did really bad. So when I applied to schools, I did not apply to one school. I didn't apply to two schools. I applied to multiple schools. And I literally did apply to multiple schools to give my options because I didn't think I was going to get into CRNA school. And the program I got accepted to, my GPA was a 3.5. When they looked at the calculations of the GPA with this, because every school does a little bit of a different calculation of your GPA. It's not what's written on your transcript. They look at the core courses that's specific for their school. And I met that requirement that I didn't have, they didn't really care about the GRE. And nowadays, some schools are not really requiring GREs, or they're more flexible with it. So just think about that as well. I would focus your experience in the CVICU. I would say you should also, I'm speaking to everyone because this is an example. What Christopher is sharing with us is important, so you can start thinking about it. Another thing with Christopher, for example, this will help you, is that when you're in the ICU, for you want to get your certifications, you want to get all your ACLS, BL, all your life support. It's required for school. Advanced life support's required, and literally these courses are like you could just do over a weekend. It's very simple. You look for the course, and it's a weekend course. CCRN you have to study for. Let's see. Looking at the ER was very slow paced in a rural area, didn't have many emergencies. CVICU, is awesome now. I'm feeling a bit incompetent right now. You are definitely helping me. Okay, don't feel incompetent. Listen, questions are important because these questions are helping other people. So you asking the question, someone else is thinking of that same exact question. Okay. So don't ever feel that way. I'm happy you're asking these questions because I want to help you. I want to help everyone that's here. 7 people. I'm so happy. Even if it was one person, I'm here to help. So, one of the biggest thing with CRNA schools, the goal is you need to really work at an institution as a high acuity. What does that mean? That, it's a busier hospital, a trauma hospital. Maybe they have big surgeries. Maybe they have a lot of sick patients. Let me give you an example. So you can work at a rural hospital and it's not busy in the ICU. You have patients who don't even belong in the ICU and they're in the ICU, right? They're walking, talking, having a conversation with you. when when I was in the ICU, and this was just my experience, I wasn't even looking into CRNA, but I loved the ICU. Before I decided, when I was going into the advanced practice nurse practitioner school, my ICU was NYU Langone in New York City in Manhattan, and it was one of the biggest teaching hospitals in that area. There's many other ones. There's Columbia, Mount Sinai, and there's more. But it was a pretty busy hospital. And the ICU, they had patients on something called ECMO. They had patients on a lot of different advanced hemodynamic monitors. A lot of patients were transferred from other hospitals to come to my hospital to be taken care of because they were so sick. Sometimes I'd have patients on like 10 different drips. You think like, how's that possible? Yeah, like maybe not 10, but for sure a ton of drips. What does that mean? In order to keep this person alive, they require medicine to keep their heart pumping, um, to keep them asleep because they can't be awake, to keep them stable because if they didn't have these medications, they would pass away. And so those medications keep them stable. Especially working in the cardiac ICU, which Christopher works in, you see a lot. One of my good friends I work with, he worked in CVICU. He's an amazing CRNA. You get really good experience because those skills that you get in the ICU will help you when you're actually working as a CRNA. Seriously, a lot of those medications and let me actually look up some of the, I actually looked up a bunch of stuff just to give you an idea. Some people may not know what I'm talking about if they're not in the ICU. That's actually one of the things I wanted to kind of hit on. Why you need to go to ICU? Because you have to be comfortable with a ventilator. What's a ventilator? It's a machine that helps to basically act like control the lungs, allow the lungs to function well, okay? And vasoactive infusions. So a lot of variety of infusions to keep the person alive, for example, like epinephrine drip, or I don't know if you know what these drips are, but I don't want to give it too much detail, but a lot of drips that to keep the person alive, okay? And some drips to keep patient asleep because they're so sick, they need to have they need to sleep, okay? And hemodynamic monitors. Some people have like an arterial line. It's a line that goes in their artery. It can mean many different locations. It could be a femoral line in their groin. Christopher might know what this is, or a line in the hand, and that will continuously read your blood pressure. You need to know how to, know about those things and more advanced monitoring systems. Also, this helps build a strong foundation. Okay. So when you go into CRNA school, you kind of have an idea of all these different things. And it's literally totally different, Christopher, and everyone. It's totally different. I have here Jess Wong. Hey, Jess. Thanks for doing this. It is better to be in the hospital and be more autonomous or have a doctor in charge. Being autonomous seems more stressful. Okay. So, another thing, I'll answer this question as well. So, being a CRNA is a little bit different than most professions in nursing. So, as a CRNA, given an example, 95% of rural America is CRNA only. What does that mean? There's a nurse anesthetist at that hospital, and that's the only anesthesia provider. So, you can work independently. How does that work? A lot of times you work with the surgeon. They sign off your charts, but you do everything on your own. For me, I've never done to that extent in like a rural hospital, but I have worked in surgery centers, for example, and I was pretty much the only anesthesia provider, or I worked with other CRNAs that were also independent. And also, one of the facilities, there was a doctor, but he had his own room, his own cases. So he was independent. But the nice thing is that you have each other. You can talk with each other. Send a message like, hey, I have a question about this patient. Hey, I may need an extra hand. So even though you're alone working in a facility, for example, with multiple anesthesia providers, or you're working independently by yourself in a hospital and you're the only person, you always have someone you can always call. That's the beautiful thing about nursing and anesthesia. You develop these amazing relationships that you can call anyone to ask questions. And even if you can't call someone, you can work with the physicians in the hospital, and you can also have consultations with other people in different areas. So you're never fully alone in the medical field as long as you speak up. And one of the things about being autonomous, it is stressful because it's your decision. I mean, your decision that you make is make or break, right? So but with experience and practicing as a CRNA, you get more and more comfortable. I remember me practicing by myself. I was nervous at first. It's like, oh my God, everything's on me. Um, but then it's, I felt very confident in my shoes that if I had a situation, I would ask for help. But I never really felt like it was, I was never working in a facility totally by myself, like for example, but um, so you can work independently. I'm giving you an example. You can work medical direction where you're under an anesthesiologist. You could do supervision, which is like, for example, medical direction can be like 4 CRNAs, and then you have one anesthesiologist that's pretty much, kind of directing. Not, it may not be fully directing, but they're kind of like 1-4 ratio. Depends on the location. Then you have supervision, where you can have maybe 20 CRNAs, I'm giving an example, and one anesthesiologist, for example. And you're pretty much independent, but he's still under that one umbrella of one anesthesiologist. And then you have more independent, where you're on your own, and you have maybe the surgeon sign off on your charts. That's an example. So that's the one thing about being a CRNA. It's pretty cool because I'll give you an example. I work at a community hospital. Initially, I worked in a trauma hospital, and it was a very fast-paced environment. And I learned so much. And then I worked in a community hospital where I currently work, and I love it. It's a nice variety, a nice mix. And the more experience I get, and the more knowledge I gain, I just want to share it with others. And I feel very confident in my shoes. But I always say to myself that if I have a question or concern, I'm going to ask the anesthesiologist for a hand, ask the other CRNAs for help. I'm never fully alone. Okay. So let me go back. What are ways? Oh, let me go back. What are ways we can prepare ourselves for CRNA school? Great. So, Christopher, so some ways you can get yourself prepared. Of course, ICU experience is staying in the ICU. Now, you require at least a minimum of 1 year of ICU experience, not less. So, either you're in 6 months, you need at least 1 year of ICU experience. But most schools, they'll accept you between 2 to 5 years. That's not always the case. Some students I've actually recently met, they were ICU nurses for 1 year, and they got accepted into a CRNA program. So all depends on you. And study habits, I would say the CCRN exam, that's a huge thing to study and really understand, to prepare yourself with the knowledge, like kind of understanding all your drips and all the critical care thinking is very important. But mental strength is huge because actually recently the interview process. So, say for example, you apply to a CRNA program, right? And saying 100 people apply to a CRNA program, giving you an example. Maybe only 25 of them are accepted for an interview. I'm giving you an example, right? So 25 of you, they say they didn't accept you yet, but they want to have an interview with you. They want to meet you. So one of the girls I recently spoke to, I was precepting her, and we spoke about it. And she said to me that she applied to 6 different schools across the country because she knew this is what she wanted to do. And that's the first thing. The second thing is she said that the interviews were very different depending on the school. So when I went to my interview, just to give you an idea, to get you all to kind of hear a little bit more about it. Um, It was rigorous. I had about 4 or 5 professors in front of me, the director, professors, and they asked me a ton of critical care questions. A lot of the questions from my CCRNA certification exam was asked. Then they asked me social, like emotional questions about me and how I would handle certain situations. Not situations with patients, but situations with others. Okay. And then to top it off with a nice piece of ice cream or a hot cup of coffee, my New Yorker is coming out. They also asked me to write an essay, handwritten. So I went into a room, I had maybe 30 minutes. They gave me a topic, and I had to write an essay. I think the essay was related to my research program, research my research, what I'm thinking about doing for research, or like to better my intensive my ICU, for example. I don't remember 100, but those were kind of the topics. So that was interesting. Now for 2025, one of the students was explaining to me, going back to her, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. She went to one school. They asked her emotional intelligent questions, like in a situation, what was one of the situations where you were with someone and you had a conflict? How did you deal with it? Then she went to another room, and then they asked her like critical care questions. Then she went back to another room and they asked her the same exact question, but a little bit different. I wanted to see how she would answer it. Another school she went to, they asked nothing about critical care. Nothing. It was only emotional intelligent questions, trying to see what kind of person you are and how you handle stressful situations, how you handle group situations. So that's definitely something to think about, because you may expect to go to an interview and it's just all critical care. It's not like that anymore. They want to see also if you fit the cohort of students. So they have all these students that come for the interview. They want to see how everyone's dynamic will kind of melt like a melting pot together, if they're going to fit with each other. Because I've had experiences where I've heard people have did all the work, ICU experience, great GPA, but they didn't have support of a family. So when you're thinking about going to CRNA school, you got to think about what support you're going to have. You know, I'll give you an example. When I went to CRNA school, well, my orientation, I was 9 months pregnant. 9 months pregnant, literally 9 months pregnant. All of the students and my professor, I mean, he knew I was going to school, but everyone else thought that my husband was going to be going to the program. My husband knows nothing about nursing, medical field. He knows nothing about it. So they all thought that he was going to be going into the program, and it was really me. That's stressful. That's difficult. That's hard to think that having a newborn baby, having a family, all the things that goes along with it. Should I really go into this program? I still did it. My husband and I, we didn't have a job. We literally didn't have a job when I went to school. CRNA programs, nurse anesthesia, are full-time programs. It's not like an online schooling where some schools you can go online and do it virtual. Maybe that's coming in the years, and maybe there is a school out there that does it, and I would love to hear that in the comments below. But it's a full-time program. It is a big commitment. It's rigorous. It peels so many layers of yourself that you don't even realize that you have. And I remember my second semester. So my school is a little bit different. It was in the beginning, um, it was like didactics, you learning everything. And then my second semester started incorporating school, like going to classes, as well as clinicals. So studying for exams and then having to be in the operating room for 8 to 12 hours. That was the dynamic. And I remember I didn't want to, I was like, I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I told my husband, I'm like, Plus, I'm up every single night with a baby, a newborn baby, and I was like, I can't do this. But I had support. My husband was like, there's no other option. You're going to school. We have all these loans because I didn't have a job. And he's like, yeah, we have all this loans. You have to go to school because how are we going to pay off these loans? There's no other option. And so I cried. Um, but the biggest thing I would say, my program was amazing. My my director, all my professors were amazing. When I remember, I don't know, one situation, my professor was like, look to the left, look to the right. Med school is different. You may look to the left and the right, and it's 500 people, but in the end, maybe just 100 people. But in this CRNA program, everyone that you see in this room, we're all graduating. We're all becoming CRNA. There's no option. If there's something going on, come to me. We are all graduating together. You don't hear that much, like in most careers or most programs. I remember having so much support. And that is something you need to think about too. Not just um, going to school, the best school in the country, or, I want to go to the top five schools, or it's not about that. When you graduate from a CRNA program, no matter what the program's called, you're a CRNA. When you graduate from a nursing program, it can be Columbia or Yale, or it can be a school next door. It doesn't matter. You took your certification exam, you are a nurse, you're a CRNA. Doesn't matter. We're all within the profession. The biggest thing is make sure you're applying to a supportive school. Looking into the culture. These are questions you should ask. The culture. How does families, if you have a family, how supportive they are families? What does this class size? What's the ratios? What's the outline of the program? Those are some things you should think about when you're thinking about going into, hey, everyone. Yeah, some new people. So those are some things to think about. So given an example of Christopher example, I would say get your CCRN, strengthen your application. Now, one of the things when you're thinking about becoming a CRNA and applying to a school, it's very important to have leadership experience in your hospital. Maybe you work, for example, I did a long time ago, sepsis is very common now, but I was a sepsis champion on my floor. So I would like kind of educate on that. I remember I updated the ACLS board. I would be a part of the code team. Something to think about. I was a part of the code team. So whenever there was a code call, I would run up to the unit and help with the code. I was also involved in research. I did substance abuse research. I also, being in school again, doing nurse practitioner, that also looks good on your resume. But leadership. Also, I worked in the resuscitation committee and I was a recorder. I just did like writing all the notes from the meeting. So just being involved in anything leadership related, maybe research on your unit, anything little. You can always ask your nurse manager and they would love to have your help with something. Also helping update protocols on my unit. I did that as well. These are a lot of things I'm talking about, but this is over like 5 years of me being in the ICU. But those are some things to think about when you're thinking about being in the ICU and working. What are some steps you can make your application strong? This is not about having the GPA nowadays. Honestly, it's not. You can have the 4.0 GPA and do nothing on your unit and literally a low, you're not going to get accepted, or you may get accepted, but they want more of a well-rounded student, okay, to apply to their program because and also in the emotional intelligence is huge nowadays because you can do all the things, but if you don't have good relationships with others or know how to communicate well, that can affect you. Another thing I would say is think about what, if you're in ICU currently and you're close to deciding to go to CRNA school, I would say research program, research project, an idea of anesthesia related. So if you're a CRNA in practicing, what are some things research based that you can do? Those are some ideas. I would a really easy way to make that a super simple way of finding out the schools that you apply to. Look at the different professors and see what they're into. If you don't really know anything about that, I remember what I did. I looked at different professors in all the schools, and they were nurse anesthetists and they were professors, and I looked and saw what kind of research stuff they were into. And whatever I was kind of interested in, I was like, I kind of like this research project. And then I did a little bit of research, and then that was kind of what an idea I thought, like, that's something I actually want to do. Because I was actually interested in it. And you can always tweak it around when you're doing your own research project too. And plus, they like that you already thought about that, because your application, it varies how they're gonna the application. Some schools, they want you to talk about with your essay about what are you thinking about research base, or they may ask you questions about why do you want to be a CRNA. The biggest thing, for example, Christopher and other people, is that you should shadow a CRNA. That's number one to me. You have to shadow. You at your hospital, wherever you're working, I would go to the anesthesia department, introduce yourself. That's what I did. That's exactly what I did. And say you're interested in becoming a CRNA and you're just curious as to shadow, even for an hour, if that's possible. If you can shadow, you don't want to touch anything, you just want to see the day in the life. And that would be an example of what you can do. If you're not a nurse yet, you can get started on your journey. It's never too late. So if anyone else has any last minute question, actually, it's been a while, a lot of talking. Does anyone else have any questions that I can answer for them today about being a CRNA? So just really quick, until someone answers a question, you have to become a bachelor's prepared registered nurse. Okay. Then you need a minimum of 1 to 2 years of ICU to get some certification courses under your belt, like CCRN and a couple of like ACLS, BLS, and PALS, and some experience on your unit. The programs nowadays are about 3 years because they're doctoral programs, doctorate of nurse anesthesia practice. And you would just have to take your board exam after you graduate. So those are some things to think about. It is a lot. I probably went off on a tangent. I do apologize. But those are some things to think about when you're thinking about becoming a CRNA, the journey of becoming a CRNA. Let's see if I had a couple of things I wanted to say. Shadowing is very important. Working on your GPA if it is low, retaking some courses. Being able to pay for school is actually a hard pill to swallow. Can you talk about how we can? Okay, so yes, if you are currently working as an ICU nurse or an ER nurse, wherever area you're working, you need to start saving. Start saving. Save as much as you can. Put aside a certain amount of money. And then when you do apply to a program, I took out loans. And now you think, oh, taking out loans. Yes, I took out loans. My husband and I, we did not work. I had to take out a lot of loans, a 6-figure loan, 6-figure. But being a CRNA, the salary is very high. Not very high, but the average CRNA is probably making about $160,000 to $200,000 a year. Now, actually, it's probably more for 2025. There was a huge jump in salaries this year. It's crazy. So, making well over $200,000. So for me, when I was working, I had a baby, I had my husband. My husband wasn't working initially. And working with that salary, I just put so much money towards it. Within 3 years. I paid off my nursing um, debt that I didn't pay it off. Literally, I didn't. I paid the minimum. I paid that off, and I paid off my six-figure um, debt from schooling. So that is a hard pill to swallow, but you have to make sacrifices. And if you don't want to take out loans, look into scholarships. There's many scholarships out there, even in the aana.com. It's just look that up, aana.com. They have scholarships there as well. And also your state, for example, each state has their own um, nurse anesthesia a committee, for example, and they also give scholarships as well. So that is definitely a huge thing. But loans is what I did. I did do that. Let's see. Any other questions? Let me see. Anything else? I wrote down notes just to help everyone. I want to make sure, like, anything that's updated. All right. Well, it was so nice talking to everyone. And I will have another live soon. It's always going to be spontaneous. I will let you know the day of because of life and having a family, but I want to be here as a resource. And I'm so happy that I was able to share. I hope it wasn't too much talking. I hope I was able to answer your questions. But if you weren't able to be here in the beginning of the video, I will make sure you can watch the replay. I answered a lot of questions, especially Christopher, who is here with us today, asked a bunch of questions, and it pertains to everyone. Because these questions is where we get things going. I don't want to be rigid and, I want to answer your questions. I'm here for you, not for me. I'm here to share for you. So what you need, you ask me. And if you are having questions, things popped in your head, definitely make a list of some questions. And even though my topic may be something different, I'm still willing to sit back and answer your questions. And if I don't have the answer, we'll figure it out together. So I hope you have a wonderful day. And just note that being a CRNA is a tough journey, but it's very rewarding. I love what I do, and I'm so passionate about what I do. I don't know, it just makes me so happy to give amazing anesthesia. Now, what does that mean, amazing? I just love giving anesthesia. I love learning. I love growing. I love teaching. I love having students with me and learning and growing. And I'm also here virtually to help you. May not be answering the questions that some people are answering, but I'm here just to be a selfless soul, just sharing. And so I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.